Welcome, Angela. I'm excited to have you as a guest on my podcast. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Connie.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. So please, before we dive into the topic, tell my audience, where in the world are you located? And one thing that we don't learn on your website or from your presence that surprises people when they hear it about you.
Sure. So currently I'm in Calgary. I've been here 48 hours now. Woo! Just arrived back from San Juan del Sur in Nicaragua. And something people don't necessarily know on my website is that I have a professional dance background. And that's actually why I'm back in Calgary, is to, in my off hours from personal branding, I'm going to be building choreography for this year's dance season.
Yeah, this is amazing. And I know something else. You were also a dentist in a former life. But
true.
Now you're helping people turn their personal brand into a client-generating machine, you claim on your website. But as we just heard, you have a dance background. We're a dentist. So how did you get here?
Well, originally since I was 2, I suddenly started to love teeth. So dentistry was always my direction. 24, I graduated from dental school, started working with children because I was really shy. So it was easy for me to, work with kids, tell them stories, and then barely talk to the parents and send the children on their merry way. Then I decided to buy a practice and had to fill really big boots. The dentist that I was replacing was 50 years my senior. He was super charismatic and I was this shy little wallflower. So I had to learn how to pull myself out of my shell if I wanted to meet the patients where they were used to being met when it came to personality. Mm-hmm. So I struggled with that, but I forced myself to sit there and talk to patients and just sweat underneath my scrubs as I just, sat there and tried to communicate with them and got better and better at it. So it's a totally learnable skill. And just as I got my practice perfect, I had the best patients, I had the best team, I had the skill set that I wanted, I was getting referrals from other dentists, then my hands stopped working properly. And suddenly I went from knowing exactly what I was supposed to be in the world to having no clue. And it unfortunately took 6 months for them to diagnose what was wrong with my hand. And that the last day that I practiced, 6 months prior to that, was the last day I ever got to practice in my life. So I was kind of sent spiraling into a tailspin, trying to figure out, what am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to contribute? Because my destiny since I was 2 was to play with power tools of blood, work on patients, get them the smiles that they wanted, get them the surgeries that they needed, and send them on their merry way. And suddenly I had no idea what I was supposed to do. So I was listening to people around me who had seen other people go through this. Like, getting injured as a dentist is not uncommon. Oh, yeah? And they're like, you've built this amazing brand, you have a great patient base, you have a great reputation, just keep the practice and bring other people into your place. Well, that was easier said than done because my practice wasn't basic. I had IV sedation, I had implants, I had sleep apnea, I had full mouth reconstruction, which most dentists might have one of those skills, if that, beyond what their basic dentistry training was. So I ended up having to have a slew of associates coming in and out, trying to fill out those skill sets. And so it wasn't easy to replace me, unfortunately. And I hadn't even realized I had made myself irreplaceable by building out the skills that excited me. So I carried on for 2.5 years. And then finally, the oil crisis hit and my practice was in Calgary. That was 2015. And I saw the economy go down super, super fast. And I decided it was just time to peace out and move on with life. And frankly, every time I stepped into the practice after my injury, it was like someone tore a scab off my heart and I started bleeding again because I thought my destiny was to be a dentist. So once I sold the practice, I was like, you know what, I need a break from dentistry. Went back to dancing full-time professionally, which I had done since the day I graduated from dental school. So I built my professional dance company in Calgary, became the second largest adult-based Latin company within 6 months. And for the next year, just let the pieces of what had happened start to just come together and figure out, where did all these pieces click together? Why did I lose my career? Who am I supposed to be? What am I actually going to contribute? And I realized, I spent a lot of time building my practice. I had a unique skill set. I was niched. I was passionate about what I did. And I wanted to help other dentists not go through some of the major things that I went through that were awful, including losing my career. So I built Unleashing Dentistry's Potential, which was a business coaching company for dentists, and started to get that to take off by getting on LinkedIn. Talked about niching, talked about passion, talked about dentistry. And in a year, I went from 200 to 12,000 industry followers. And people from all different industries who were watching me went, how did you do that? And can you do that for me? So I started dabbling with other people's accounts, seeing if what I had done was unicorn or if it was actually replicatable. And it was replicatable. So that started to turn into me taking on clients for their social media, for their LinkedIn, for their personal branding. And Unleashing Influence became a company in January 2020 because of the request for that. And 2 months to the day after I opened that company and had 2.5 full-time team members, then the pandemic hit and Calgary got shut down. My team came to me and they're like, you know what, everyone else is getting laid off. You can totally lay us off. It's totally fine. And I said, you know what, buckle down. We are going to take this to the moon. By 10 months into the pandemic, we had 14 full-time team members. We had skyrocketed our production. We had skyrocketed our client list, and really Unleashing Influence became the most viable option for me. The dental company got shut down because dentists were shut down. The dance company got shut down because we weren't allowed to socialize in person. Then I decided to move to Nicaragua a year later, so January 2021, and got to paradise and realized I'm sitting in paradise and I'm working 100 hours a week staring at a white wall. This is ridiculous. So I started divesting off my businesses so that I could focus on what I did best, which is personal branding, help people to burn what's holding them back from unleashing their influence in the world. And so that is all I do today. I work with people in masterminds and help them to, change the world with what they know, take that amazing expertise, that amazing experience, that amazing passion, and help them to get found by the right clients.
This was like, oh my God, a roller coaster just by listening to it, and you have this huge passion inside of you. There's a word that came up for me. It's a German word constantly that I don't know how to translate into English. For those who understand German, it's Tausendsassa. So it's just somebody who jumps in with both feet into whatever life serves them and creates this huge thing out of it, and then reinvents herself. No, it's just crazy, amazing. Congrats to this. But it must have been hard too. I don't even know what to say. So my next question would have been, why LinkedIn? It seems so corporately compared to how you present yourself. Like, you're so passionate. For those who watch the video, they have seen how you talked and everything. Very passionate. LinkedIn still seems, even though it's changing a bit, a little stiff. So let's start there. Why LinkedIn and not TikTok, for example? You would be perfect for TikTok, I think.
Well, when I started leveraging LinkedIn, my options were Instagram, which was really still a picture platform. There was Facebook, which worked really well for my dance company. And then there was LinkedIn and Twitter. And what I did was I kind of dabbled with each of those to see what actually would work best. And LinkedIn, hands down, what was working best for me, because I could send messages to the decision maker, I could get a response, I could get onto a phone call or meet them in person. And so it just became like I was racing the different platforms against each other, and LinkedIn pulled way ahead. What I found was the dentists who were actually interested in business were on LinkedIn, even though it was not a great platform back then, to be honest. It was still very much a, find a job, try and promote yourself, try to recruit people from it. But there was an opportunity already happening that thought leaders were doing well on it. And with the style of how I present, I stood out because I wasn't boring, right? And when I started, well, let me preface that. When I started, I was boring because I was so afraid to stand out. The advice that I was given was, you need to blend in before you stand out. So I had a shaved side of my head, and I took my curls and parted them. So I had curls on this side. I tried to be more conservative. I tried to be like the dental business coaches that I had worked with, who were older men. They were very conservative. They were very measured in what they said. And when I tried to do that, I was uncomfortable on camera. Every time I looked at my hair, I was like, oh, it's going to move and not look the way it's supposed to look. I don't sound like me. And finally, there was one day I just said, screw it. I'm just going to be me and see what happens. Yeah. And that was the turning point when people started to go, I like what you have to say. You're really interesting. I think your content is great. I want to get on a phone call with you. So by trying to blend in, I was doing myself a massive disservice. And I allowed myself to subscribe to that because it was easier to hide behind this facade instead of step forth and be like, do you like me? Do you not? Right. And when you're really putting yourself out there, if people don't like you, they're actually not liking you. They're not liking that wall that you've put up there. So it's quite a challenge to put yourself out there. And people are always like, just be you. Well, I
Yeah.
subscribe to that philosophy, but I also know that for a lot of professionals, just being you is so hard.
Yeah. And so you kind of are the reason why I checked LinkedIn out more. Like I was on LinkedIn before, and I noticed that it starts to change a bit because I noticed that certain people that I know from maybe Facebook or Instagram are showing up more on LinkedIn, but they were, like you said, they were kind of still kind of blending in, and it starts to change. And then when I looked into you before you came on as a guest, I'm like, oh, she is refreshing. So that's kind of how I, well, I still am not courageous enough to really show up the way I want to show up or the way you show up, but it's more how I would want to show up than this corporate feel, LinkedIn, dusty, whatever, old white men. Nothing against old white men, but I was just, it's the whole atmosphere that I feel like you really make more LinkedIn more accessible. I love that. But like you said, a lot of people blend in, and it started to become very noisy in quotes on LinkedIn as well. So, and you say on your website too that most people are unclear and generic in what they're offering, and they're blending in. And so we need to show up more authentic, but like you said, it's hard. How are we even starting to show up more, like in a platform where everything is still like a little bit old school and corporate? How do we start showing up? How do we find the courage? How did you find the courage? Like you did it in dentistry already, had to find the courage. How did you do it?
So for me, it was just, I was putting in all this effort and I wasn't getting what I wanted out of it. And
Mm,
so for me, something just had to change. I'm like,
mm,
well, I'm not being truly me. I'm not speaking the way that I speak. So why even do it if I'm not actually able to show up as me? So I decided to just show up as me. It was still probably a lesser version of me than I am
mhm,
now. Not probably, it was definitely a lesser version, but it
mm,
was closer to who I was. So I was
mhm.
taking baby steps to showcasing how sassy I am, to showcasing how sarcastic I am, and
Yeah,
showcasing the rebel side of me, which is part of my archetype.
yeah.
And when I start working with clients, what I do is I do archetyping with them. So I crack them open. I take a look at what makes them them. I take a look at their talents. I take a look at how they interact with the world and show them this is who you are. This is what you do.
Hmm.
And there's great things about that. There's also crappy things about that. And it's okay because there are other people out there like you. And once they've had the archetyping session done, we call it the crack you open session. Then what happens is they go, oh, that is me.
Hmm.
I couldn't have written that better about myself than you did. And they start to go, it's okay that that's me. I have this light side to me, I have this dark side to me. And sometimes you need to use the dark side to get attention. And once they are okay with who they are, then they can start breaking down that facade, burning it down so that they can actually authentically step into who they are and own that. But
Hmm.
until you own it, it's really hard to show up as your real self. Lots of people talk about authenticity
Yeah,
and they're not sharing their
exactly.
whole journey. They're like, oh, here's the perfect side of what I've done. Nobody
Hmm.
believes perfect anymore.
Yeah.
And when you can actually be vulnerable and go, you know what? I've been on rock bottom. I have, made some massive mistakes in my career and I survived it. And now I
Mm.
can show you how to not make those mistakes. That's when people really start to subscribe to what you're putting out there. They want to follow you. They want to get on phone calls with you.
Hmm.
And you're not going to get the same response if you're hiding behind that facade of perfection.
Yeah. But that's kind of what we were taught, no? So like when I
Totally.
entered the professional like workforce back many years ago, we're not talking about how many, that's where we were told. So like I was told, like, you don't show yourself, you show the facade, you show the professional you. And and you talked about how you were a little bit rebellious. I was always a little bit rebellious too. So I always refused to wear one of these business suits, and I was in corporate, in finance, not as
Yeah,
high up
highly
as they wanted
conservative.
me. I didn't want to climb the ladder more, but I was always dressed nice, but I refused to do this thing. So we were told to show up with this facade, and I always had a facade up too, like I think we all do. And then
Yeah.
stepping into this authenticity is really hard. And like you said, most people just talk about it, but they never really tell you how. You mentioned the brand archetypes. I wanted to ask you about this. So one I think is the rebel. How many do you have, or where, how many? Because a lot of people talk about archetypes and then they come from different angles. So I don't know how many archetypes are there in what you're working with your clients with.
So there's 12 main ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the system that I use, there's 5 sub archetypes to each of those 12. So there's 60 in total that we play with.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I give them a quiz that helps to show up like what are the traits that they are registering on the Richter scale for. Mm-hmm. And then I pull in the 60 that are applicable to them. And we go in and we start digging in and saying like, how does this resonate with you? And it's really interesting because it takes us about an hour to wheedle it down to 5 or 6, and sometimes we get it down to 3 or 4. So most people have multiple dimensions to them. They're not 100% rebel, or they're not 100% innocent, right? They have these different dimensions, and the beauty of the dimensions is in different parts of your life, not just in your professional life, but in your personal life, you pull out those different dimensions because they're like a little toolkit of how you operate in the world. So there's moments where I'm going to pull out the magician, where I'm transforming people's lives. Rebels, they burn shit down. Whereas magicians help to transmute things into different, from one state to another, right? So we're able to pull out those different parts of our being to be able to operate in the world. And it's interesting to see people as they get older, different characteristics will come out and different characteristics will fade away as well. So as we mature, we get more comfortable with certain sides of us, and something that served us really well when we were younger might not serve us well when we're older. And so we have that maturation of our archetypes and our dimensions that we can use, or we can start to let go of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can totally see that. I am very passionate about astrology, and we can see that there too, and how you progress in life. We're never standing still, and we're constantly changing. Yeah. Even though kind of like the core who we are stays the same, but we're maybe going more the high road rather than the low road on a certain archetype. Yeah, I find this very interesting. So when we then figure out our archetype, who we are, so then we start showing up less boring, how you call it. Like I'm always glancing over here because I made some comments to say it right, how you say it. And you say that when our message becomes more fun and more and less boring, then we can attract more people to us. But how do we do this to still show up professionally? Or I don't want to necessarily say professionally. I want to say more like, how they always say, like, people buy from people they love and trust. No, so we have to kind of create this trust, which sometimes requires some professionalism, no? And especially on LinkedIn. So how do we blend this to a nice package that it actually works?
For sure. So let me ask you a question. If you're talking to someone and you feel like they're holding back or they're keeping a secret from you, do you feel like you trust them?
No.
No. And that is what most professionals do. They have this facade they're hiding behind. So they're keeping secrets of who they are. They don't want to share their true journey. They don't want to showcase what they really think because they're afraid that people aren't going to like them. Mm-hmm. Stop trying to get people to like you. You want to polarize your audience. You're going to have people who love what you do because they see your story. They see themselves in your story. They see that you have been there and done that of what they want to do. And they go, this person can help me. You're going to have people who also cringe when they see your content, right? You're going to have trolls. And if you start having trolls, you're probably doing something really right because you are starting to get people who are like, ugh, I can't stand you. If you walk the line of likability, you're probably never really going to work with your ideal clients. You're probably going to have a lot less fun in your work. You're probably not going to be doing exactly what you're meant to do in this world. If you're working with people who love you, you get to be who you are. You get to leverage your expertise and your passion in your world because that's what they want from you. The people who hate you, you don't even want to talk to them, right? You don't want them showing up on your phone call list. You don't want them heckling you. You want to actually polarize because that is going to allow you to do your best work. And, when I say have fun in your work, it doesn't mean that you're full of giggles. If you're a jester, maybe you will be full of giggles, right? If that's your archetype. But even just by being able to be who you are with your clients, you are going to have more enjoyment. You're going to be happier. You're going to feel more fulfilled because you're not spending all this time in your head trying to keep track of who you're supposed to be and where. And I remember when I finished dental school, that whole professionalism thing, they're like, oh, you have to be a professional. And we're like, oh, okay, when we're in front of patients, we have to be a certain way.
Yes.
And I remember one of the guys I graduated with, he was like, well, this is how I'm going to be with my patients, and here's how I'm going to be in real life. And all I could think was, that is going to be exhausting, trying to keep track of who you are. Because what happens if you see a patient while you're out in your personal life? Yeah. It's not going to work out very well if you're playing, if you're like have two very different sides to you. So if you can just own who you are and be okay with that, there's going to be people who don't like you. There's going to be people who hate you. There's going to be people who are going to turn on you once they realize what your journey has been or what your opinions are. And that's okay. We can't be everything to everybody. And I think that's our biggest fear as professionals is we want to be likable. We want to be able to serve as many people as we possibly can. But there's enough to go around. So we don't have to fake it. We don't have to have that facade up to be able to get our clients. I would like people to be working with the people that they really want to work with, doing the work that they really want to do, because we're going to have happier professionals.
Yeah. So I remember when I started the workforce, I was two different people too, maybe not in an extreme way. I was just more outspoken professionally because I kind of felt like I know what I'm talking about. And then in my private life, I was more, I wasn't really showing myself too much because I didn't feel so secure. And now it almost seems like sometimes a little the other way around.
Right.
And I think it has also to do with social media. So social media has changed a lot. I don't know whether it changed for you too, but I mean, before social media, also the chance that somebody saw some stuff about what you're posting when you're showing up as your private self was, or just meeting you as your private self was probably, you could limit that, no? And now you have no chance, no? Like you literally kind of have to show up as one person, no? Because they will eventually find your private post somewhere, or they will figure it out that you're different, no? So
well, it's true, but people will still try to hide it. Like I remember, so I graduated in 2004, and I remember when Facebook first came on, it was like started to get popular 2006 onward. And as an employer, we were also going on and creeping on Facebook. And like, if someone had posted themselves in a bikini on Facebook, we're like, oh, that's scandalous. And so we wouldn't necessarily consider hiring them. And now that seems absolutely ridiculous because we are putting more of our lives out there, especially on our more personal side. So if someone goes and creeps on your Facebook, they're probably going to see you, on your holidays with your kids. And so they're seeing that more holistic version of you on your personal side. And then on the professional side, if you're using multiple platforms on LinkedIn, people are still trying to be, that straight-laced professional, which really just means you have a professional degree. Doesn't mean it's not a decorum that you're supposed to be following. But when people are on that platform trying to be that professional, then they don't lean into who they are. They don't own their whole life. And when you compare those two things, then there's a gap. And if we see that there's incongruency anywhere, we do not trust people, right? It's that like you feel like they're holding a secret or they're not telling you the whole story. We do not trust people when they are withholding information. And people are getting more and more sensitive. Their barometers are more and more sensitive as to whether you are being real or if you are being fake or if you are trying to be perfect. And nobody believes perfect.
Which is actually a good thing. And it's also very exhausting. I remember like when I had my professional persona and my private one, and when something went on and like you have to keep that facade up, and it's so exhausting, and you come home and you're exhausted more from keeping the facade up than from actually the work that you did. So that energy could be used so much better to actually serve the clients. No, so that's I could see. So what are some of the cool benefits that you see when you work with your clients that come out of them stepping into their more real them or into their archetype, other than they have more energy because they don't have to keep the facade up from the what they shouldn't show, like, or not shouldn't show. It's that whole facade thing that is not helpful.
What I see is they have that energy to niche more into their mastery, and they get okay with niching into their mastery. People who are afraid of who they are usually in a scarcity mindset. So they're trying to grab everything that they possibly could grab. Someone who is okay with themselves has a more abundant mindset. They know that there's lots of people out there who could be potential clients. They know a small percentage of that will be their ideal client. They know there's a small percentage of their work that they are masterful at, and they become okay with niching into that mastery. And people are more and more seeking out a master, not a jack or Jill of all trades. And once they're comfortable with themselves, they're also comfortable going, I don't know anything about that, right? If someone asks them a question that's outside of their mastery, they're like, I don't know anything about that. Or I'm not really great at that, but I have someone I can send you to. So they start to be okay with saying no to the work that they don't really want to be doing, to the work that doesn't give them pleasure, to the work that, you know, they would rather not ever do that again. But when we're in that scarcity mindset, we tend to go into the jack or Jill of all trades. We're like, oh, yes, I can do that. I can help everybody. I can do all these skills. And you really can't, not at a high level. So it really does help give them confidence to be okay with everything about them, their personality, their their profession, their experience, their expertise, their journey. It allows them to fully step into who they are. And it's not instant, right? They'll have light bulbs after the cracky open session and start to be like, oh yeah, no, that is me, that I'm okay with that. And then they have moments where they get scared and then they try and go jack or Jill of all trades. This happens in my masterminds all the time. And it's interesting to watch them like revert back to who they are. And then we're like, no, pull you forward back into your authentic self, back into the kind of work that you want to do. And then they relax again. But when fear hits us, we do some really strange things as professionals to try and save ourselves and to get ourselves comfortable and make sure that we're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's so totally true. And the other thing is too, is like we always hope that there is one thing out there that we can do and it solves all the problems and doesn't put us on that roller coaster that we automatically are going to be on. Like you just said, we're stepping into our thing, we're confident and everything. And then one day somebody says something or some troll comments and then we pulling back and we're still hoping that there's something out there that magically makes it all go away and we don't have to go on a journey, but we usually do. So let's get a little bit back to LinkedIn. So what is one thing that we could do? For example, everybody always says like the headline, or do you even call it that way, on LinkedIn, that just that first blurb, that is the most important one. How can you show in that little blurb a little bit of your personality, just to start with, if people wanted to start with?
Sure. So there's two ways I suggest doing your headline. So either blatantly like stake your claim to fame, so you are the blah 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 of your industry, or do something that makes them lean and go, that's interesting, what does that actually mean? So I use option 2 for my stuff. My subtitle is The Arsonist, Burning Down What's Holding You Back from Unleashing Influence Through Your Personal Brand on LinkedIn. So the arsonist part, people go, they see Dr. Mulrooney, then they see the arsonist and they're like,
That's what happened to me. Yes.
Right. So it makes you go, okay, something is different. We want to be different because that's going to allow us to stand out. Now, for some of my clients, like one of my clients is the Women in Tech Accelerator. So she has made her claim to fame that she is accelerating women in the tech industry. So that is option A, stake your claim to fame, write that, and then have an explainer after that as to what that actually means. So those are the two things that will help you to stand out. Please don't put dentist, CEO, director, blah, 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 all your just professional titles or even your degrees. Nobody cares about that. That makes you look like everyone else. And if you're in the coaching or consulting realm, please do not put coach in there, because then people are just like, oh, it's another coach. Ugh, moving on, right? The next thing I would suggest is actually write out your story in the about section, like a story, not I have, what is the one that I keep reading? It's like, I have a proven record of blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares about that. You sound like everybody else. Instead, write out why you are doing what you're doing today. Where did you start there? So what was the moment that precipitated you to take that path? And then where are you going? That is the journey that you want to take people on, because especially if you're selling a service where you are sharing your expertise, you are a knowledge broker, people want to see where you've been, why you're doing what you're doing, how you want to change the world is what you know. You can't do that with your proven record in your industry. And it will actually have people seeing themselves in your story. They will see that you have been there, you've done that, you have done what they want to do. And if you are reaching back in your industry and pulling people forward because you want them to not have to go on as bumpy of a journey, then that is what is going to sell people to actually want to connect with you.
Yeah, good tips. Makes me want to go and look at my LinkedIn profile and probably make everything wrong there. It's so funny. I could talk about that forever, but I want to be mindful of your time and my audience time. So usually around this time, I ask, where can people find you? But obviously for you, it's on LinkedIn. Are you on any other platform, or is that where you like people to go and find you and consume your content, how we these days say so appropriately?
Yeah, that's where I live, is on LinkedIn, day in and day out.
So they could connect with you there. I know you have sometimes you have some classes on there. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Brag a little bit what all you offer for people to find you and to hear more about that if they got tickled now by what you were saying.
So every month I hold a little seminar. So it's an education seminar, a Q&A, a little bit of networking as well, called Personal Branding Monthly. And there is a different subject matter each time. So the last one we had was get on video, because everyone's not getting on video because they're scared. So teaching the techniques that I actually teach my high ticket clients how to actually build their personal brand. So you're getting a snippet of, what you would actually learn in my mastermind in that session. People also can join the Unleashing Influence community, which is it's a group on LinkedIn where you get my content at a faster pace than you do on my personal profile. All the people in there are trying to build their personal brands. So there's interaction, there's lots of tips and tricks in there. And you have the opportunity to join exclusive roundtables where 10 people come into a room with me. You get to pick my brain for an hour about whatever you want. And so those are the three main things. So Personal Branding Monthly, the Unleashing Influence community, and then once you're in the community, then you're allowed to join a roundtable.
That's interesting. I think I am in a few LinkedIn groups, but not really doing anything with it. It's still like I said, I got sick and tired with Facebook, so I kind of focus more on LinkedIn again. But that's very interesting. So whoever listens, go check that out. I was on your class last week. I must say it was very informative. It was an awesome class. I have lots of notes. I'm in the process of implementing this. I recommend it highly. So before we wrap up, Angela, any last words that you feel like, is there anything you feel like I didn't ask, or is there any tip that you want to leave my audience with that you haven't shared yet, or whatever you want to say at the end?
My best tip is get brave in being who you are. Own exactly where you are. Don't fake it until you make it. Just be okay with who you are, because you're going to go miles farther if you do it that way versus trying to, sugarcoat what you do, how you think. You're much better to just step into your authentic self, your real self, and show that to the world, and let the cards fall where they may.
Yeah, we probably don't get eaten, even though we think we do. Well, thank you so much. This was really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, which was an amazing journey. And then what you learned and what you teach now. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.